Volumes sounded a little bit.
We will be starting in a couple of minutes, so I know people are coming in and we just want to thank you to those who are here because you made it. I know it was raining really hard here earlier this morning for the whole Southland, but you're here. So that's important. Thank you. ¿Hay alguien más que ocupa traducción que no tienen audífonos? Levanten la mano. So Nita, we have everyone. Okay, great. Thank you, Nita. And thank you, Booth. Our Vietnamese interpreter is ready.
Yeah, we're good.
All right, so welcome everybody. Thank you for being here to have a conversation with our community about a very important topic, and it has to do with the groundwater, the city's safe drinking water. So I wanted to kick off the meeting with the welcome. I am Margarita Macedonio with the city's planning and building agency. I oversee the neighborhood initiatives and environmental services office. So our neighborhood office has been around for decades, but over the past 3 or 4 plus months, we have been evolving to focus more on environmental justice section of the city's planning agency. So part of it is, working with communities that are disadvantaged, that are affected by a lot of environmental facilities, use, pollution, all of that. So the city has a general plan with over 77 implementation actions to respond to the environmental conditions in our community. So that's a little bit about us. I wanted to go over just a little bit of our ground rules. We didn't follow the first one. We didn't start on time, but we're going to end on time, right? We just asked people, including those of us here on the panel, to silence our phones so we have less distraction, right? We're interested in your thoughts, in your participation, questions, conversation. That's what we want to accomplish. And these are ground rules that we share for our neighborhood meeting. And by the way, I wanted to acknowledge the Delhi Neighborhood Association president, Vivian Martinez, who's been a lifelong resident here. Her family has roots here. They advocated for this Delhi Center years ago. So it's really amazing to see how this center has become a hub for a lot of community events and a lot of family gatherings as well. Thank you, Vivian. So yes, we want to listen to each other, even whether you agree or not. We want to be able to listen respectfully. Try not to interrupt each other, and that goes for the panelists too. Let's try not to interrupt each other as well. We will have a moderator, and to redirect the conversation, help us keep focused on the agenda, there's a lot of updates, and this is something that the community has been asking for. So here we are today. This is the agenda. We have, we've covered number one. We'll introduce our panelists soon, and our moderator, who's from the U.S. Attorney's Office, Amanda Bettinelli. The City of Santa Ana Neighborhood Initiatives, we have some information about reporting concerns. Then we're going to turn it over to Public Works, and they will be giving some highlights regarding our water, our drinking water. And we have the team from the Orange County Water District who will be talking about the groundwater quality protection program, an update on that. We also have the Department of Toxic Substances Control from the state here as well. And they will also provide some status updates on the cleanup efforts on site at some of the locations. Then we'll have some time for question and answer. So for those of you, if you signed up, there's a lot of material out there, but from our office, we wanted to highlight this new sheet. It's called Reporting Environmental Problems. It's in English and Spanish. And we thought something like this would be very helpful to inform our community about other things you could report when it has to do with air quality, when it has to do with pollutants in the storm drain, fire hazard complaints, lead concerns. So please, we'll have an opportunity to review this in detail at one of the neighborhood meetings. And actually a lot of the neighborhoods that are in the environmental justice areas will be able to continue to have these conversations, but we just wanted to highlight that. We also have an environmental resources page on the city's website that we're placing a lot of information about air quality, lead contamination, to help raise the profile in our neighborhoods so that they're informed, connected, and involved through the process working together. So that's a little bit about our new office, our expanded focus. And then this is something that came out of LA County Public Health. But when you're observing activity, we just wanted to provide some recommendations on collecting detailed information about what you're observing, you know, the time of day, what is it that you're being, what is it that you're observing when it comes to environmental concerns in your neighborhood, getting a name and contact for whoever you're talking with, so that you have that documented. Also, you know, being able to note more specifics like a complaint number when it comes to reporting something online to an agency. So it's part of your gathering of documentation. And then also, you know, making sure you're communicating your concerns in the language that's most comfortable to you. That's a really important one. And keeping copies of pictures. I know some of you have presented this information at neighborhood meetings, but this is a good reminder for all of us to keep in mind as we're documenting our eyes, our ears out in the neighborhoods on a number of things. So thank you. Okay, this is the exciting part. So we get to turn it over to our moderator. So this is the contact information for our environmental justice coordinator from the this is the U.S. Attorney's Office, and there's well, let me just turn it over to Amanda. She can explain it much better.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here tonight. So I'm an environmental justice coordinator. What my role is I work with the Department of Justice. I'm a federal criminal prosecutor, and my goal is to serve the community by helping to identify and partner with you on environmental concerns. Oftentimes when we're in our neighborhood, our home, or our workplace, we don't really understand some of the hazards and things that we're seeing. And a lot of times we're turning to different agencies to try to get assistance, to try to identify a problem. I think historically, the perception of a lot of community members is that it was not either an immediate response, perhaps there was a response in a language they didn't understand, or there's a time gap between when they noticed a problem identified it, reported it, and getting some information back on what was happening in response to that. So my role was created, basically about a year ago, to try to facilitate the reporting of violations, environmental violations by the community directly. It can be to the Department of Justice, but of course you have all of these partner agencies available to you as well. So I'm here tonight in the role of moderator because my job is really to facilitate a response to environmental hazards and concerns in communities that are overly burdened by environmental impacts. My view is that I'm your friend today on my own. I work for the Department of Justice, but I'm not representing the Department of Justice's views. You'll hear my opinions on different things that we're going to learn about. Sites in your community that are of concern. You'll hear my immediate reaction to answers that people will provide. I will ask clarifying questions to ensure we have greater understanding. We're going to take questions at the end, but somewhere along the way, for that particular question, you certainly can raise your hand and kind of have to address it, clarify, or aid in understanding as we move on. So my name is Amanda Bettinelli. I do not stand on ceremony. You can reach out, call me Amanda, that's fine. But I'm here to sort of move the conversation along, answer questions, but also to provide some transparency on where the cleanup of the groundwater contamination in some of the residential areas in particular, where that stands for very specific sites. You have some contaminant locations that are due to industrial actors or businesses in your community. And we're going to get a little bit of a summary about the status of the cleanup in each location. Is everyone clear about the goal of this evening? Comfortable? Okay, so we're going to move forward now, and I'm actually going to turn to our next speaker. We're not going to stand on ceremony, so people who are going to be speaking can introduce themselves very briefly. But I want us to first turn to talk about reporting. You want me to go through the city of Indiana water first? Yes. Okay. So you guys take it away. Can you introduce yourself and a little bit about your method of moving through the materials?
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Cesar Barrera. I'm the Deputy Public Works Director overseeing your water resources team here. Tonight, our objective, and thank you to the community for giving us the opportunity to come out and showcase a little bit where your water comes from. And if we get anything in the next couple of slides, is we want you to understand where your award-winning water is coming from and how it gets to your home. With that, start from the next slide, please. Clean water, safe water. What we do for a community, we deliver award-winning drinking water to your home or business, respond to water and sewer emergencies, so we can discuss sewer after we'll be here to discuss that afterwards. We continually monitor and protect our water sources and distribution system. Important. We're also going to get into it and talk about how we conduct extensive sampling and testing to ensure your water meets all water quality standards, and how we keep our community clean, safe, and enjoyable. Next slide. This is an important slide here, and it shows the overall system. The city of Santa Ana is 24 square miles. Within those 24 square miles, we have 20 groundwater wells. Okay? And we have 10 reservoirs. We have 7 import connections where we receive water, imported water from MWD. We have 478 miles of water running through our city. With that, in addition to that, we have 45,000 water services that goes to all our residents. Next. All right. So roughly 75% of our drinking water comes from the ground. And that's what we're here to talk about, the groundwater, right? And 25% comes from imported Northern California and also the Colorado River. We have a video to show you to give you more details on that. But I just want you to understand it's roughly 25-75. Local water and groundwater here, 75% of it comes from local water. That's like it. So the ground aquifer, high level, this is high level, and I'm sure in a bit we'll talk in more detail. Those 20 wells that we have throughout the city, strategically located throughout the city, they're drilled about 1,000 feet deep. It depends where you're at, your different depths. And we set what we call our pumps, our pump holes. They are set roughly from anywhere to 250 feet deep, 350 feet deep, depending on where you're at in the city. So in essence, we're really deep in our aquifer. We here in Santa Ana are like in the center of a bowl, if you will, Orange County, where we pump our water. We are in a unique situation. We're very fortunate to be located here. This aquifer that we sit on and we draw water from is managed and operated by the city's main source groundwater supply. It's managed and operated by the Orange County Water District, and they're also here to find out that. With that, we can go to the next slide, please.
The city of Santa Ana is known around the world for its award-winning water. But have you ever wondered where that great tasting water comes from? The majority of Santa Ana's supply is groundwater and comes from directly beneath us. Roughly 75% of the city's water is stored underground and pumped to the surface by 20 wells spread throughout Santa Ana. The remaining 25% of water consumed in the city is imported from outside the area. This water comes from Northern California via the State Water Project and from the Colorado River via the Colorado River Aqueduct. For more information about your award-winning water supply, visit us online at www.santa-ana.org.
With that, I'd like to add this system that we have in the water utility. It's closed, and it's a closed system, and it reaches out and touches 45,000 services a day. We in one day consume on a hot day, we can consume up to 50 million gallons of water on a hot day, right? Average right now, we're averaging, because it's colder weather, we're averaging about 20 million gallons a day on the average day. With that, I'm going to pass it over for water quality oversight.
Good evening. My name is Robert Hernandez. I'm the water quality coordinator with the city of Santa Ana. I'm going to share some information about the city's water quality division. So we provide safe and reliable water supply and ensure that the city is in compliance with all federal and state laws and regulations. We maintain the highest standard of water quality by performing weekly, monthly, quarterly, and biannual basis sampling with a wide range of water quality parameters. We do a lot of sampling. Not only our staff, we have operators and inspectors that sample our water sources, reservoirs, wells, the distribution system, along with the independent laboratory of San Bernardino, who collects samples and analyzes them for us also. We also release the annual Consumer Confidence Report, CCR for short, details the important information to help residents make health-based decisions about their drinking water. A lot of good information in there about water conservation, the main goals that share with the public and community our water quality. We have a newer version coming out July 1st this year. It's also available online, and we have some of the back with the we also educate the community about water quality. So we attend over 100 special outreach events a year, all sharing information, answering questions about where our water comes from and water sources. We collect and analyze over 10,000 samples annually, contaminants at various points in our water system, all of which are below the state and federal maximum allowable levels. And those levels, there can be charts within this CCR showing what we get from groundwater, imported water, or distribution. Santa Ana's award-winning water. So year after year, the Santa Ana's earned international recognition for our award-winning tap water. We've been entering the Berkeley Springs International Water Tasting Contest since 2011. We're very proud of our water. Not only is it great tasting, but it's high water quality. Our city's water placed in the top 5, the best municipal water in the United States many times. 2011, we got the bronze, we got the silver, gold medal twice. 2021, we won the silver medal. Not only did we win the silver medal, the Metropolitan Water District, the imported water source, 25% of our supply, they won the gold that year. So Santa Ana, we got the gold and silver together.
We'd like to thank you for your time and take this opportunity to introduce the rest of our team that's here. Armando Fernandez, our principal civil engineer. We got Robert Gonzalez, water quality supervisor. We get an idea of water quality inspector here at any time. We'll hang around and we can answer any questions related to your water.
Right, thank you. So one of the things that I want us to make sure that we're keeping track of and making distinctions about is we're talking about the drinking water wells. We're also going to be talking about some of the groundwater contamination. And our next presenter is going to explain where the drinking water wells are located and clarify a little bit about the contamination sites and things that are being done to address cleanup. So if at any point in time of the 20 water wells that have been mentioned, there's a question about where they are geographically. I notice this is going in and out, so I'll do my best. I can talk louder, but ultimately I want to make sure we keep track of groundwater contamination, drinking water wells, location where residents are, and the actual business locations themselves, and we'll identify them by name. So I'm now going to turn our attention to Bill Lieber, who is the principal hydrologist at Orange County Water District.
Thank you, Amanda. I'm going to stand. And thank you for those of you who were here last June when I gave a presentation on the South Basin Groundwater Protection Program. A lot of it will be covered again. If you weren't there, then this will all be new to you. So a little bit about Orange County Water District. So we've heard talk about the city pumping water out of the groundwater basin, and there are many of the cities and other water agencies here in central and northern Orange County that pump water out of the groundwater basin. And it's Orange County Water District job to make sure that there's plenty of water in the basin, and we do that by recharging water along the Santa Ana River, capturing stormwater, and other things that I'll talk about in a minute. We also ensure our water is of high quality. So we monitor hundreds of wells on a daily basis for water quality parameters and water levels to make sure our basin is operating in an efficient manner. We also operate a seawater intrusion barrier down by our office in Fountain Valley, and that protects our aquifer here in Santa Ana from coastal waters that want to move in underground contaminated with salt. And then finally, we work to protect our rights to Santa Ana River water so that we can continue to recharge and supply our base with a reliable supply of water. So a little bit about where our water comes from. Our water supply starts up in the Santa Ana, up in the mountains, in Big Bear and San Gabriel's. And that water runs off as rainfall in the Santa Ana River. We capture it behind Prado Dam, and then release it slowly into Santa Ana River and recharge it through surface basins up in the Anaheim area, up above Anaheim Stadium and above. We capture that water in basins, and it goes back into the ground and flows down towards Santa Ana and other downgraded users, and then you can pump it out. An additional supply of water that we have is imported water, which Robert already talked about. We get about 25% of our water. It varies, 20 to 25% of our water goes back into the basin. It's imported water. And then another large supply of our water comes from Orange County Sanitation District. We take wastewater, and Orange County Sanitation District treats it and then sends it to us, our groundwater replenishment system. We run that to an advanced treatment process where it purifies the water, basically to distilled water. And then that water gets pumped back up into the Anaheim recharge basins, goes back into the ground and becomes a water supply to groundwater pumpers in the Orange County Water District service area. We serve 19 water agencies, just like the city of Santa Ana, and supply water to about 2.5 million people. Okay, so let's talk about the groundwater contamination plume that exists in this area. And I'm gonna go over try to get you oriented here on this map. So we have the 55 freeway running right here and the 405 freeway. Outlined here in this hatch pattern is the Delhi neighborhood. Okay, so that's basically where we are right now. This is Warner Avenue, and along Warner Avenue, there is a concentration of industrial facilities between basically where we are here and the 55 freeway. All of these outlines right here in red and blue are where industrial chemicals have been released into the ground and have migrated down into the shallow groundwater system. The different colors represent the agencies who oversee the cleanup of those properties. The blue represents DTSC oversight, and then the red represents Regional Water Quality Control Board oversight. So what else do we see on this map? We see a lot of dots. These dots represent drinking water wells. The different colors represent the different water agencies that operate those wells. You'll see most of the wells are these purple wells here in the lower part of the southern part of the city of Santa Ana, and this is called the Dyer Road well field, and it's operated by the Irvine Ranch Water District. The bright green circles are two city of Santa Ana wells. The city of Santa Ana doesn't pump much water in this area of the basin. Most of the water the city of Santa Ana pumps is up in this area, up in the north of where we are here. And the other two colored wells are city of Tustin wells, and then Costa Mesa area wells, the Mesa Consolidated Water District. So the plume, so this big orange blob represents the aerial extent of groundwater contamination where we've detected chemicals. Trichloroethylene, tetrachloroethylene, perchlorate, 1,4-dioxane. And we detected them some 15 years ago and been in the process of determining the extent of that contamination and then developing plans to clean that contamination up. And just to give you some idea, this arrow represents the flow, the general flow direction of groundwater. Groundwater is moving from a northerly to southerly direction, so it's flowing down towards the coast. Okay, only one water supply well has been impacted. This was the Irvine Ranch Water District well number 3. That was what initiated the project for us. That well has since been turned off. And then the next closest well that the city of Santa Ana operates, the Santa Ana well 26, is also on standby mode and doesn't currently pump any groundwater. I think we can go to the next slide. All right, so what does this groundwater contamination look like in cross section? We call it cross section. It's basically taking a slice down vertically, and then we're looking at it from the side, like we're looking at the aquifer against that wall. Okay, the aquifer is divided into 3 major units. We call it the shallow aquifer unit, which goes down to about 200 feet below the ground surface. We have the principal aquifer unit that goes about 1,000 feet below the ground surface, and then the deep, which is about 1,500 feet below the ground surface. The majority of groundwater that's pumped from municipal supply wells, like the city of Santa Ana's, it all comes from the principal and the deep aquifer system. All of the contamination currently is in the shallow aquifer system. And what's represented here are, we're showing some industrial sites by these buildings here, and then some chemical releases. This green might represent trichloroethylene release, one type of chemical. And then purple might represent the release of another type of chemical. In some areas, those releases have mixed together where they become indistinguishable from each other. We have installed many monitoring wells within the shallow aquifer system to monitor the water quality, to determine where this plume is going, what the concentrations are of the contaminants, so that we know where to initiate our remediation efforts. And then we're showing a drinking water well here, which simply shows that the water comes into the well only in the principal and deep aquifer systems. And that these wells are not pulling in any of this shallow contamination. We've talked about it already, but your drinking water is safe. Again, the contamination is all the shallow aquifer system. All of Santa Ana's water comes from much deeper systems. We sample on a daily basis. We have teams that are moving all throughout Orange County, collecting groundwater samples. We sample wells in the South Basin twice a year to determine their water quality. The parties that are responsible for the contamination also are conducting sampling on their own sites in their own sampling programs that are overseen by the regional board and by the DTSC. We're analyzing for over 500 chemical contaminants. We collect 20,000 samples a year and report over 400,000 different results a year. And I think, as Robert already stated, all of your water meets all state and federal water quality regulations. Okay, so what is the district doing? In addition to the actions that the responsible party is making, that the Manjul and the DTSC will talk about, we are also taking care of the problem that has moved off of these sites and that isn't actively being addressed by the responsible parties. So we've developed comprehensive plans to clean this groundwater. And we have just finished what's called a feasibility study, which evaluated a number of alternatives that would be feasible to treat the groundwater. And the alternative that our board recently approved for action is what's called a pump and treat system. And we're going to install a number of extraction wells all throughout this plume area. It will pump water from this shallow aquifer system. It will treat it at some centralized sites where it gets discharged into the sewer system and then flows down to Orange County Sanitation District, where it goes through their treatment process and back through GWRS and back into use. So that even the water we're cleaning up is not being wasted. We expect our design to be finished in about a year from now. We're going to an environmental review process and preparing what's called a remedial action plan that will have to be reviewed by our board. It will also go out on public review, so all of you will get a chance to see it before it's finalized and provide comments, and then we will address all of the community comments and any other stakeholder comments on that remedial action plan. And then we estimate the cleanup will begin in about 3 to 5 years. It's going to be a pretty big effort to drill the wells, the extraction wells, put the pipelines in. So we can, and there's a number of, we don't own any of the lands. So we're going to have to make arrangements for access to land. It's probably going to be within public rights of ways, streets, and then private properties that will negotiate leases for.
Clarification question. So the land that you're talking about is for the future extraction.
For the remediation, that's right.
Okay,
Yeah. And that's all.
thank you. All right, so. Oh, sorry, go ahead, yeah. Hi. New here, and I'm trying to understand, this is really great, by the way, thank you for doing this. So you brought up that contamination is found in the shallow area, but that the drinking water is from the level below that, so maybe explain a little bit how that's the case, because I guess for me, right, I'm not a scientist.
Go ahead and go back to that slide.
Yeah, you can maybe go a little bit.
Sure. Yeah, I did leave a little detail on here. So you can see these different color layers, correct?
Yeah.
The brown, so we'll say that the light color, these areas with the blue arrows in them, these represent, they're called aquifers, and they are sand material, we'll say for simplicity, where water moves easily through these sandy materials. The brown represents clays and silts, and water does not pass easily through those clays and silts. And that's why the Orange County Water District has defined these shallow aquifer, principal aquifer, and deep aquifer, is because we can go into a lot of technical details, but essentially they are hydraulically isolated from each other we have different water levels in between the shallow aquifer and the principal aquifer, which tells us that they are not in direct hydraulic communication.
Okay, so if we were to use simpler terms. So if we were to say, let's call the top one, the shallow one, S. So S cannot leak down into P, the principal one in the middle. Is that correct?
We're not gonna say, it's not definitive, we never see it cannot,
Okay,
but what we're saying is that if it could, it would be highly retarded for doing so.
prevented from doing.
Yes.
So I think that's why you're saying there's distinct, but not complete bar.
So you're saying, why isn't all this down here? Is that?
Right, I'm just wondering, like. Survey, but like, yeah, so you were really helpful, thank you.
Okay,
Okay.
okay. Anybody else have a question about the movement? You do, sir?
Another movement, they said that, Basin there's chemicals contaminating that, reservoir.
Yes.
He said he's still contaminating those companies that they are.
Actively,
Yes,
these are legacy contaminants from 1950, probably through the early mid to mid 80s, maybe even the 90s. Contaminants were being released.
so the.
Currently, they're under oversight by the regional board and by the DPSC to make sure that they're operating in compliance with laws. We would never say that they're not, because we are not there 24 hours a day observing it. The only way we know that these contaminants exist is when they show up in our monitoring
When you're
wells.
testing for.
If I remember well, it was a few years back and. It was kind of in talk that, the Jerry.
Jerry, aerospace, we're gonna talk about that. Okay, no, that's okay, so basically, the next phase, so we're first is just, is there groundwater contamination? The answer is yes. Where is it? They try to separate things to make it a little clearer so you can understand visually where it is, shallow area versus where you're drinking water. The next phase that we're gonna get into is looking at the specific sites. If you go back to your slide, you'll add all the different colors that show what. Right, so the orange is contamination area. We're gonna talk about the sites that are near, show again with your pointer, the Delhi area right there. So we're gonna
Just
talk,
Cherry.
that's Cherry. We're gonna go through each site, so you have more information about where they are in their cleanup. And where DTSC, which is the monitoring agency, is making sure they're handling their cleanup, what they're doing to make sure they're doing just that, addressing. On the groundwater extraction, in terms of like pump and treat plan, that's Bill's area, so he's gonna handle all that. We have a longer kind of 3 to 5 year game plan on that, but I think the goal here is to explain where your drinking water came from, what they're working to do to treat it sort of independently of what the specific businesses are going to be required to do as part of DTSC oversight. So it's kind of like one has your teacher over them saying, you need to do this, this, and this. And this is how we're going to check on your report card on your progress. And looking at older contamination within the property, they're trying to distinguish on-site, so if it's in your yard, you're handling that cleanup, versus things that have moved into the groundwater that the OC Water District is looking at, and they're trying to treat and clean that. Did that make sense? Okay, so now let's get into DTSC, because they can explain what's happening at each location. Is everybody tracking that? Okay, all right, so, Benjul, my microphone is not great, so I will use that one. All right, so introduce yourself as well, so they know who you are. Okay. So do a drum roll.
All right. I think this is gonna come. Good evening, my name is Michael Wells, I'm the product manager for EPC, covering the south, that's okay for the subdivision. Because we're like within Santa Ana subdivision, Dunbar Basin in Santa Ana. I am based out of the Chatsworth office, and as we go through the presentation, there are multiple project managers that are involved with projects within this area, and we will introduce you to them at the end of the presentation. Actually, some of us will here. So let's go through the next slide. So who are we? We are DTSC, we're a state agency. We're one of 6 divisions of departments of California EPA. And we are basically a regulatory agency for hazardous chemicals and hazardous waste. DTSC's mission is to protect California's people's and communities and environmental processes. And to enhance the economic viability of contaminated sites, and to comply with the manufacturers to make sustainable products. Now, these basically have three divisions. The first division being, it has its waste division, and this is one that issues permits. And we also track hazardous waste shipments, and we also conduct inspection of these facilities. The next division is the safe consumer products, and they're responsible for making sure that any chemical products come out of the industry and for consumer sectors are safer for the environment. And the third is a cleanup division. The cleanup division, which is who I work for, and we are responsible for making sure that we clean up the soil and groundwater across the whole country. Next slide, please. So let me introduce you to the 6 sites that we're going to be talking about today. We have Cherry Aerospace, MB Plating, Delhi Chemical, Dyson Electronics, Soco West, former Soco West, and Holcomb, and Diesel Logistics. These 6 sites are currently under DTSD oversight, and they have, since the last time we had a presentation here in this room, that was in 2015, where we highlighted Holy, Cherry, and MB. We have now added on additional sites, namely Dyson and Delhi. Next slide, please. Before I go any further, let me introduce you to the 4-step process that we use for our cleanup. In the cleanup, the first step is always identification. We review documents and evaluate cycle potential. And see if we further investigation as needed. And if there is investigation warranted, we go in and do some investigation. This will try to determine the nature and extent of contamination, see how far it's gone, and try and understand if there's a risk associated with the chemicals that have been identified, to the human health and environment. So that's part of the investigation phase. The third phase is our cleanup phase, where we actually put out a plan. Now, this plan could be a wrap or a raw, and definition-wise, both of them require public input, and you as a community will get a chance to issue comments that we will address once plans are going to develop towards cleaning up these sites. And the 4th step is of course remedy implementation, where we would actually, depending on a site, this would require us to either design and implement the cleanup plan that was done in previous grouping. At any one point, we could use an interim measure. If DTSC feels that the contamination has chemicals that were found at the site were posing a risk to human health and the environment, we could issue an interim measure to control contaminants that are coming on the site. Next slide, please. I want to spend a few minutes to go over how you get information about our projects. DTSD has an environmental database called EnviroStore. EnviroStore can directly be accessed through its own website. But for most people, when you type in Google DTSC, it's the main website that it's up. So here, the next following 3 slides is to allow you to understand how to get to EnviroStore, so you can pull up the information that you'd like to know about these products. Now, we're making an effort to update all of the public information pages so that the community can understand what is happening with their sites, and understand that the work that we're doing is protective of the community and the people who live in the environment, in the community. So
if you wanted to go to the EnviroStore website, put in MB, you could type that in and see that update just from your own home and say what's happening with the cleanup with DTSC at MB, or in this case, Cherry, the gentleman is interested in Cherry. So he can look that out, and that's being updated currently. They don't need to call DTSC, they're gonna get a snapshot of the current progress of the cleanup.
yes, and the updates are happening at this point, but over the weekend, we will be pushing a new update for all of the sites, which will have more detailed information that will be actually a little bit less technical and more generic in the sense of the community can understand what we're putting out. The fundamental, when ETSC project managers tend to put in status updates, there is a lot of technical information, and the community may not have the technical background to understand it. So we have made it easier to understand for the community, so they don't have a problem.
Or acceptable, understand. Okay, so you're gonna run through.
Yeah, I'm just gonna run through the next two slides. So if you do want to go to advice, where you go, there's two links there, and for those of you who have received the handout, the addresses are in there. If you happen to go to ETSC's main website, there's a two-click process. You click step one, which is the get involved button, and then one is the enlarge go button. And next slide, please. If you go directly to the environmental website, this is the page that you land. There are several ways that you can get information. The handouts that we have given out, which are these handouts that are available in English and Spanish, have numbers on the far right corner. These numbers are environmental codes, and they can be directly entered into the basic search box right there, and that will tell you the site, and you may click it and go straight directly to the site that controls for each of those products. If you want to find out what other sites exist in the neighborhood, you may put the like in this case Santa Ana, and we'll pull up all Santa Ana sites on a map. Now, in this case, we're highlighting the advanced search feature. So at the bottom we have an advanced search button. If you ever get lost in this process, there is a help in the top. It says how to get help with advanced search. It's right there, and you can get help on advanced search by clicking on that. Go to the next slide, please. So this is the advanced search page, and in this sequence of images, we're using the word Santa Ana, but just constraining all sites found in Santa Ana. And you may also insert the facility name this way, and you can also insert whether you want to see particular types of cleanup sites. There are several types of cleanup sites, there's several permitting sites, and there's enforcement sites in there that ETC is inspecting. So you can constrain what you're particularly looking for and what your interest is in the neighborhood.
I'll interject for just a moment. So I went to the Madison Park neighborhood council meeting, and basically they wanted to know about a specific facility and gave me the information. And Manjo and I are talking, and this meeting has occurred because of that question. Just so you know. So when I went to DTSC to pull up the information, I was able to search the location. But as one of the residents had indicated, the information which they're now updating had not been updated for some time. And so there was a concern that nothing was happening. And so the reason we're having a meeting today is so that the agencies responsible for the cleanup can advise you about where each location is, the status of the cleanup, make it transparent so you have good information. You're in charge of MB, you're in charge of this one, other agencies are handling that, so you have accessible information, actionable intelligence, as we say, so that you have a clear understanding of the hazards in your neighborhood, what the status of the cleanup is, and there's a good snapshot by putting in the identifying code of each of the sites. I just did the name of the facility because that's all the resident had, so I did a very dumb search. I did like NB, I didn't even have the full name, worked out fine. But then after that, you're gonna have some additional questions to say, well, how close is that to my home? And then you get the map and you can start to see, and then we can identify things further. So I just wanted you to know, it's actually user friendly. I had no technical training of any kind. And I ran into some challenges, but I was able to pull up the information, which allowed me to ask better questions about where things stood. So,
Thank you. Thank you, Amanda. So let's go to the next slide, please. So this is when you run the advanced search result, you will receive an output that has all the sites that meet your criteria. And in this particular case, we're constrained to Santa Ana. And if you want to look at any one of the sites that meet the criteria, you click on the little report button on the far left corner to see the report that exists for each of those sites. Next slide, please. This is what we've been looking for. This is the project information page for each of the projects that are. Okay, so if you're looking for MB, there'll be a project for page for MB. There's a project for Cherry, the project for Dyson Electronics, there's a project for Delhi Chemical, and every other site that ETSC is special. So
on this page, there are a couple of things that are of interest. The first is the project management contact. On the top right corner, you have a name, it's a project manager, in this case, it's my name. So you may click down that and it pops up my email information and my phone number, and you may contact me directly. If you want to contact my supervisor, it's located below. The additional information on this page is the summary. Now, the image doesn't scroll down, but each page has a summary. As you scroll to the bottom, there is a summary that the project manager updates. And this is an update will happen over the weekend, and we will have all these sites updated with the latest information. So you may be able to follow up on it. But as of today, the information is still being updated, and we are adjusting some of the language to make sure that the community understands the information. So additional, there's also the staff appearances activities. This is additional information that will be used every time we get a document. Our document shows up there. So when we approve a document, it shows up in the activities tab. And you may be able to see which document we're reviewing, and you'll be able to see the document approval letter and any other information that is available for each particular site.
I'm going to interject with a question. You talked about if there was ever a concern for safety for the residents or like something new that happened and got people worried. You talked about an interim measure. Would that be among the documents that would be available on the site?
Yes.
Okay.
So every interim measure that is approved by DTSE will be in the activities tab. Every interim measure that is going to public comment will be in the community involvement tab.
Okay, I'm going to interject because I'm ready to move on from EnviroStore, but I want to know, does anybody have any technical questions about EnviroStore before we move on to some glossary terms about contamination? I'm seeing no hands, so we're moving on, but later on, if you want to play around with this and figure out if it works, we can circle back with some folks with DTN.
So I just want to give you a quick, these are contact with my manager goes, I control MD Cherry, Spare Tani, who's not here tonight, but Scarlett Sai is, controls Soco West and Diesel Logistics and.
Right over there. So we have name, face, and project numbers for each of the sites that we're going to talk about. And we can ask specific questions if you need to later on today. Okay?
And we also have Mr. Nicholas Scott, who's the Orange County Water District site of overseas those. Our deputy director, Todd Sachs, who's not here tonight, is the environmental justice contact, and we do have an environmental justice coordinator who is on the Zoom meeting today. Up for next slide. So we have just a few glossary items as we go through this presentation, because some of the information is a little high level and we want to try and break it down. So when we talk of PC and TC, these are the solvents that were used at these sites. And they are no longer used at any of these sites, but were historically used and have caused contamination at all of these sites. When we talk of SVE, we talk about the technology that is used to clean up these sites, soil vapor extraction. And we can go more into detail at the future meeting where we can talk about the technologies in detail, because there's a lot of similar technologies, but there are still varying differences at each of these sites. And that we can have over later in the future when the community wants to do this. The same case with global phase extraction, that's another technology that's being used for cleaning up the site that use groundwater and the soil gas. ERH is another technology that's being used for resistant heating. Once again, to enable cleanup of the sites. ISCO is another chemical injection. We inject chemicals into the groundwater to try and treat the chemicals that have reached the groundwater. In this case, it could be anything from calcium polysulfide or sodium permanganate or any of the other chemicals. EISP is enhanced in situ bioremediation, where we inject bacteria into the groundwater and to try and clean up the groundwater. And then PRB is a permeable, reactive permeable barrier, which is also being used on the site. So, and if you look at the community update, there is a little handout that covers the technology that are in place and start with it.
That's going to be helpful down the road. So right now, we're just doing the overview of all the sites, but then we're going to come back and do each location more in depth. But that's not going to be tonight, but the useful information about the different, I just call them tools, we call them technology. So when I go to fix something in the house, I grab the toolkit and I say, I need the right tools for the job. Essentially, that's what he's saying, very long, very technical words. But we do want to know for each site, and you're going to at least give an overview of what technology, what tool is being deployed to address the soil contamination and groundwater contamination, so you are aware of at least what the plan is. And that you can, if need be, do a corrective interim measure to address anything that might, sort of be a hiccup along the way, and have a plan. All right, so let's turn to Chair, because we're kind of ready.
Yeah. So this is the meat of the presentation, and this is where I'm sure we'll have a lot of questions towards the end. At least we'll hold you for your questions towards the end, so we can finish the presentation. For Cherry Aerospace, but BTSE have oversight in 2009. They've been designing it, and aerospace fasteners, and they've been at this facility since 1952. They've also used the chemicals we see aside from, these chemicals were previously used. In 2017, we approved a soil vapor extraction work plan, and this system, which was installed in September of 2019, has been in operation this entire time, and has been effective in making sure that the chemicals that were released on site are no longer or posing a threat to local health. Now, let's go to the next slide if we get a chance. Because I want to talk about the solid extraction system and also what's coming down the pipeline. These are figures from 2022, and these are the quarterly monitoring that's done. As you know, as you can see, there are houses along the parking block of Cherry Aerospace.
I drove by it, so it's very clear, it's very adjacent to the street, so as you go through the slide on the left, just identify the street, so people if they are not familiar can kind of see. I think you tapped it on the way here, and then there's a number of residential homes that are right along the street and the drive. So I think there's gonna be a lot of people interested in what the cleanup is.
Yeah, so all the houses are evergreen. Cherry Aerospace parking lot actually occupies what would have been a street up here. Historically, Cherry's Aerospace has wastewater tank and has waste storage in this area. So this is where we actually have most of the contamination related to it. In 2015, when we had our meeting, there was concern about vapor intrusion into the houses. Cherry went back out there and tried to understand what was going on. We were trying to get access into the neighboring properties. Access was not allowed, and we didn't actually get an access agreement from any of the residents in the neighborhood. And therefore, we were not able to put in indoor monitoring inside the houses. Therefore, what Cherry did is they put in soil vapor extraction system that covered this area. So this is the current figure, and it's quite clear that it's holding the vapors from migrating offsite. And unfortunately, I don't have a picture from when it was in 2017, but the image is clear. The system's working, it's been operating, every quarter it's monitored, and we get a report that we review.
Okay, have you had any residents speak to that, any concerns about properties here in Basin 2?
We have not heard.
Okay, but if they did have a concern, they can contact the free website and make a complaint that I'm selling something and see something, I'm concerned.
You're more than welcome to contact us about any concerns you have with Cherry. So in this particular case, I also wanted to highlight that Cherry is currently working on a full-scale revenue system. This is just a pilot test that's been running for this entire time. We have a plan to do a cleanup that extends completely off-site, but the permitting process is taking a long time. We just received a permit from the Air Quality Management District, the Southern California Air Quality Management District, in September of 2022, and we're still waiting for some additional permitting to come through so the system can be put in place. Our anticipation that we will be starting construction in the fall of 2023. That's assuming that we can get the permitting in place. A lot of this permitting related to electrical lines. There's a railroad in the way of the extraction system. They need to go underneath the railroad. So there's a lot of technical components of this that make it very challenging. Cherry is working with Ray at this, and we will get there. Like I said, our anticipate start date for construction is fall 2023, but this date has been moving a little bit due to permitting requirements.
You have a contact with moving glacially stone, but you're as comfortable with entering out, so
Yeah.
you're more supplementing to address permitting question.
Yeah, so right now, AQMD, urban had, we have seen the permit from AQMD, so AQMD is not the concern. There are the railroads who have to issue some authorization for constructing underneath the railroad. There's gonna have to be stuff, city of Santa Ana, there's a power requirement issue, multiple things that go along with this, and we will get into it in a deeper conversation at another subsequent meeting, because it's too much siloable.
Sure, but the goal is the permits there, we just need a couple of extra hurdles to move to the next.
Yes.
Okay.
So, can we do the next slide? Okay.
Please, yep, okay.
All right, so let's talk about MB. So MB is the other side of the neighborhood, the 5.2 acre site. DTC has been involved with MB since 2001. We have a proposed measure that we put in place in 2010 and expanded in 2017. This was for a bioremediation. We have injected bacteria into the groundwater to try to control the chemicals that are in the groundwater. MB is a leading manufacturer that has used solvents to try to degrease, and then we've got other chemicals also in the groundwater, unfortunately, as part of the cleaning operations. And they've been around since the 1960s. So a lot of the chemicals that are found in the groundwater are specific to their operations, and they know where the contamination is at. And currently is working on an electrically resistant heating cleanup plant. Now, the plant is in the house. We actually had a meeting about it yesterday, and we will be putting it out for public comments soon. We anticipate that once the plan is finalized, we should be going to public comment probably by end of 2023 or beginning of 2024, when we would be going to public comment with the plan. The plan is to install electrically resistant heating wells, so that we can heat the soil underneath and extract these solvents that have been released at the site. And the system is still in design phase.
Okay. Sounds like a promising thing. Will they get notice of the comment here?
Yes, they will. There will be a full public consultation from DPSC on this one, and we will be notifying this community as we get closer to the date. Except we anticipate maybe end of this year, and we will start the process, but we don't know when. These things take a little while. Again, and these having to deal with permitting to install these. There are some conversations that we would need to have other assist agencies.
The one thing that I hope is that Margarita, maybe we can reach out to the neighborhood council, so that they would be 100% aware of that public comment period, so that we have full transparency, so we'll make that as a priority. Keep going on.
Yeah.
And
So I just wanted to quickly highlight at least the bioremediation wells. The pink and purple ones up here are on the eastern side of the site, and there are a couple of here that are the western side that were installed in 2017. These are the bioremediation wells. I do not have a picture for the ERH wells, but they are in this area here and here. But those figures are going to be still under redevelopment and then making changes. So no one will release that at this moment. Let's go to the next slide. Let's talk about Dyson electronic. Dyson has been around, Dyson, this site of Dyson was actually involved in electronic manufacturing since the 1980s. And Dyson was one of the last ones. Prior to 1972, I think it used to be used for valve manufacturing. It could be electronic valves or could be mechanical valve. But it was the site was used for electronic manufacturing for the longest time. It was transferred to DTSC in 2017, and DTSC is working on this project. Since IRAP that was approved, interim remedial action plan was approved in 2021 with 5 phases and some injection as part of the remedy selected. Phase 1 of it is complete. We have done an excavation that was approved in January 2022, and I'll show you a figure of that in the next slide. And we're still working with the owner to try and understand what the next phase is going to be. There are 5 phases. It's an active facility. It is you have to move things around. do the other phases, and the company that's currently renting would need to adjust the operation. For the next slide, I'll show you the. So this is the that's the excavation that was done in 2021 was this area between buildings A and B, this A and this B. And this is the area of excessive mold contamination at the site. We are still working on what phase 2 will be, but it will be in this area.
Now I ask a dumb question, what is the excavation? Is that moving dirt?
Yes,
Contaminated dirt?
yeah,
Okay.
we moved dirt. We moved a lot of.
Okay,
So, don't have the exact number on hand, but we moved quite a bit of dirt between the two, sides buildings. And we were unable to get all of it, so there's some dirt that was left in place because the buildings would have been compromised as we were digging down. So there are some areas that still damaging left in place that we'll have to deal with. Next slide, please. Delhi Chemical, Delhi came to us when we water board, this is transferred to us. And in 2016, the water board had approved a raft that had 8 basins and 8 focus areas, and that was going to be addressed within 15 years. So area A, which is has already completed under EPSC and was approved in May 2020. We removed about 1,800 tons of soil, 1,300 cubic yards of soil from area A, and included an area that was previously had a clarifier they basically had a sealed area that they removed, and that was part of the area A. So about 1,800 tons of soil was removed. And then we completed area C in May 2021. There was 403 tons of soil that was removed there. We're currently working on area G, which is currently will be approved probably by the end of the month, end of next month.
how much soil is left there?
There's actually no soil being removed from area G.
Okay,
We did a risk assessment to understand how much of the contamination is there, and based on the results, it was deemed that the excavation was not necessary in that area. And if you go to the next slide, it shows the areas. The area A is up here, this is area A, and this is the little area, the 200 area that was also removed. Area C is up here, and area D is this tiny little square right here. The blue line that you see is part of the dual phase extraction that's running at this point, and that was been running since the 1990s. Sorry. Can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So Silver West is another side of this area. It's the half an acre site, 2,000 square feet. And they operated from 1959 to 1991. ETSC started interaction in 1997, and in 2009, that interaction with the dual phase extraction and solar extraction was terminated because it was not effective anymore. All the contamination that we could remove be removed, and now we have to go to the next phase. This is the TC plume that way back in the day, and I don't think the current plume, but it's the shallow. Oh, sorry, it's the TC plume, the groundwater. And the site was really hard to see in this background, but it's right here. This tiny little green back line up here is the site, and this is the TC plume in the shallow groundwater at the site. We in 2015, so in 2015, there was a remedial action that was approved by DPSC, and part of the plan is to demolish the building. So this blue structure right here is the optimal unit 1, which is the property, and it's hard to see again in the yellow background, but there is this section right here, which is the outside component of it. It's operable unit 2. There's quite a few things on this figure. We are currently planning to use a groundwater treatment. It's an enhanced in situ bioremediation. So they're right here. There are 3 sets of wells, right here, and right here. The 3 sets of wells have been installed right here. These are ESP injection wells, and there's a permeable reactor barrier right here in the red dots. So this is the plan that has been approved, and BPSC is waiting. If you need further information on this, Scarlett side will be able to provide you information.
I think we're getting some translation on the reactive barrier and some other technical terms that were mentioned, but I know that will be
Yeah,
our next.
yeah, unfortunately, that it's a little too detailed for this kind of presentation. We'll have to have one at a later time. Next slide, please. So these are logistics. They were operating, there was a diesel repair shop that operated from 1983 to 1993. And they had a clarifier, and they also had, that they used to dispose of oil waste, and they had contamination with mostly PCC. They've been an interaction of the site, and the vapor mitigation measure that's been running at the site is doing ventilation and purifiers at the building since 2015, and they're also running an SVE system that's been operating since 2018. Now, the green circle that it's hard to see on this, but yeah, the green circle right here is the extent of the SVE system operation. And the fact that that's the range of approximate treatment zone for the SVE system that's on site. And there's quarterly monitoring that's being done, and so you may be able to see that information on the EPC website. Can we go to the next slide, please? So these logistics there, then the different renewable action plan that was approved in December 2022, and this includes dual phase extraction. The enhancement and the dual phase extraction wells are located here. These will be moved out of the site. These are going to be where the installation is going to be done. My understanding, again, Scott may expand on when these things will be installed, but we've approved it, and that's the next phase. So this slide, and then I think the slide. And sure, we have a lot of questions for these sites. Matter, you want to take it forward?
I do. Okay, so I appreciate everyone's presentation. The goal here was providing more information so we understand the details about the different sites, how to get an update on the status of contamination treatment, and the long-term plan, which of course different sites have different timelines. But now the opportunity for folks who are here that have questions about specific sites, feel free to ask those questions. I don't know if the gentleman has sufficient information about Cherry. Did you want any additional information about that? You're comfortable? Okay. I am going to walk around a little bit because I want to make sure I didn't miss anyone. The lady who had a question about the water separation. Do you have any other questions about the presentation? Any sites specifically? No. Okay. Okay. All right. So I will leave it to anyone else. If you have a question about some of the technical aspects, I have a question or two. I don't want to take anybody's turn. So if anyone wants to jump in. All right. So I'm seeing no hands. I think the question that I think is a reasonable one is of all these little hash marks and dashes and things on the DTFC presentation, I think the question of the lady is an appropriate one. It's some of the movements. I know we talked about vapor, right? That the other one stuff, now that we're worried, we have to know.
Well, you can't smell chemicals that
Can't detect it. Okay, so we need that tool, SVE. The
SB, yeah, the SB is to extract it, to detect it in ambient air,
Okay.
breathing air. We have other testing methodologies that we use, super canisters. Yeah, that's for another conversation, but you cannot smell the concentrations that we are detecting.
Okay, so you're measuring it with instruments, we can't smell it, we don't know it's there, you're aware it's there, we got monitoring stuff like an alarm, since this is here, like non-home, or non-technical people. So if I've got carbon monoxide sensors in my home that say there's something happening, it should be able. So you're monitoring stuff that we can't smell or see, but chemicals emitted from the actors, the industrial actors, the neighbors that we talked about. And you're actively monitoring that, so it doesn't spread. With the tools you have from the site to their residential homes.
That's the goal, and that's been very effective. The two systems that system that been installed in Cherry especially have been very effective in making sure that it doesn't affect the high resistance control.
Okay, but my understanding from your presentation is that there are different tools required for different projects.
Yes.
Because of the type of work that you're doing, I think I heard chrome plating on one, the other one's doing some kind of fasteners or things. So depending on what materials they were working on, that implicates what got into the ground, which later compromised the groundwater. at the
Yeah,
base.
sites like this have at some component of solvents usage, so most of the common ones, BP and DP, and that's why we see so common across all of these sites.
Okay.
But a few of them I have additional other chemicals associated with their operations.
Okay.
Individual specific to the companies that are operating.
So if I have my home next to Envy, for example, and you've got this plan of what you're working on, I can check out on EnviroSolar. And I don't really understand the technical aspect of the tool that's provided. Is there a comfort level that we can say that what we see on the EnviroSolar reflects kind of the best practices at the moment to contain the contamination near their property?
Yes,
Okay.
and to the extent that they have a question about it.
Yeah, go ahead.
I have a question. You mentioned in the Cherry presentation that you were not able to obtain access into the residential properties that were along Cherry's property line. So if you had, is that a better way to test? And if so, are you still seeking access to the properties to be able to like confirm your current analysis of?
Good question.
We would love to get access into those residences, and that's one of the things that we've internally been having some discussions about it. So if we are able to access, at this point, with the results that we see from the cherries sampling, that they sample the probes that are in between where the release happened and the houses, they're probed right on the property line border. We don't see the chemicals going that direction because the system is pulling the chemicals away from the residences and keeping it right where the soil areas. However, we would like to get some confirmation testing, so we would like to go back and reapproach the subject. My understanding is that in 2017, and I was the project manager at that point, and afterward, I have long retired. So we would have to reapproach this again, and Cherry will have to work with us to make sure that happens.
But I think her question is not that Cherry would need to get permission, but that residents were near the property, they wanted to say, hey, we got some concerns about what's coming onto our property. They might be open to letting you do that, so I don't know that you need to go per se through Cherry. Go ahead.
I was actually gonna suggest, because there's all those areas in front of Cherry that are empty now because of the construction that's going on. Are you gonna test those areas? Because I believe the city owns them at the moment, so
Okay.
it seems like an opportune moment
Margarita, are they?
to test those areas. And I know there's a ton, I'm from the neighborhood association, so I know there's a ton of residents who would be more than willing to give access to their homes.
Okay,
And then I know I have another question, I guess the last thing.
all right, so let's make it at least so we have a plan forward here. So with regard to the vacant or empty locations near Cherry, perhaps Margarita can follow up and see if that works. She can figure out the comment.
I'll be right
Okay.
back.
I wanted to add, first of all, let me introduce myself.
You can take it from the whole-
My name is I'm hoping up branch chief of the Chatsworth office, and I just wanted to add a little bit to the question, right?
Sure.
So, in the Cherry presentation, he spoke about the fact that there was a release of TCE into the soil. It migrated in the gas form under the property. And at one point, they wanted to gain access into the property to see if it was making its way inside. Right, since then, they've started the soil vapor extraction system that has pulled the vapors back. And data is being collected indicating that those levels have dropped significantly offsite. So the plume is contained, but if there is a doubt,
Yes.
and you want your home tested and it's within that area that was impacted, we'd be happy to work with you and talk to you about that. We'd also be happy to share with you the most current results to show you what the levels that are of concern and are not of concern. But still, if there is still some question and you still want to have your home tested, then we'll bring in the equipment and collect that test and share that with you. So that's available to you. But when we go into the next time we come out and talk about the specifics and talk about details and values and what are the levels, we'll make that decision together.
Okay, I think that's good. So, go ahead.
So recommended if you do like specific sites, like a targeted outreach then to the.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think that's smart. Okay, so I like, that's a good idea. So the neighborhood council for the areas impacted directly near or adjacent to Cherry, there's an immediate request that they actually have some direct outreach. They get the results in terms of latest sampling that you have, and be given the option to say if it's appropriate for them that they want to get their own. Okay?
Yes,
Okay, so we got confirmation. That's something to write down so we can follow up.
I just wanted to follow up that I can work with the neighborhood reps, which is Vivian and Erika, just to coordinate that outreach and, to make sure that, people are informed that this option is available at the team on.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, very good. Thank you. And someone else had a question. Yes, yeah.
Back here.
Go ahead.
¿Puedes hacer su pregunta en español si gusta?
Sí, yo
Ya.
Es una primera reunión que hacen de esta manera. This is the first meeting that you have about this. It's the first time I'm participating. I think they had a prior meeting in 2017, 2015. But I think we have a different game plan now to give more information so that people are much more aware of the contamination, access and impact to their home, and containment efforts, so there's some comfort to know that something's actually being done. Because I do think there was definitely a gap in understanding about cleanup efforts, impact on the water supply, and then a different question about groundwater versus drinking water. And people needed some comfort to know that their drinking water was okay, and how do we know that? There's actually testing happening. And the folks in charge of drinking water, they're here to answer those questions. Groundwater, big game. Smart man over here, he kind of mapped out how they're handling that, which is a little deeper groundwater questions. And I think it was the goal is to give visual information, verbal confirmation of what they're doing. You know, I'm learning right along with you. And the important thing is that I understand it, that you understand it. So we know what's comfortable in terms of the next steps, because you're then going to be given the opportunity to participate and give some comments on their game plan for the next thing that impacts the actors that are in your neighborhood, right? So you have these businesses that are going to have to comply with the next plan for the phase of cleanup. But let's say you notice something and you say, okay, you know, I don't know if you saw what I saw, but maybe an interim action might be needed because I'm whatever, I'm smelling, I'm seeing, it's a problem. So now you know who the team is, who's on the ground, and they'll be responsible to say, this is what we can do, this is how we do it, because they're gonna have a checklist of these are the things we have to do, but at least you're a partner in the process. And you're not being given information, you're participating in what does the remediation look like. If we can help you to get better information about how it's impacting our health, we want to know how we can do that. And this is why this conversation is important. And it's always wonderful to talk to smart people who are very scientific, but if you can't understand it, it's not helpful. And so I needed to learn myself what the vocab was.
Are there businesses invited here?
So we didn't get that far, I'll be very honest. When I got the first concerns from the residents, I really had to kind of get the team together here to figure out who was in charge of your area and to learn how to ask the proper questions so that we could give you information in a way that was acceptable. Because if I gave you that vocabulary test of what's a TCVE, I couldn't help you, right? So my goal is to dumb it down to Amanda's level so that we can have a conversation about what the team who is charged with the fix and handling and managing, so we don't have this contamination spreading into your homes or areas that we worry about, so that they can give you the answers themselves. The next meaningful question would be to see if they will agree, the entities, to address what they're doing, because they may be doing more. I don't know, don't have that answer. The reasonable question, I did not personally invite them to come tonight. I invited these folks, and Margarita was very helpful in making this happen. Because when I get community questions, my job is to give you the information, not to tell you, trust me, I want you to know who's responsible, because it's more important that you have reassurance when I go back to wherever I need to do the next location, that you know who to call. Go ahead, you have a question.
Yeah, so from what I understand, it's community concern that has brought up like issues involving
Yes.
businesses. So I'm not aware about, I know legacy means, you know, they've been there in the past, but current ones, and I've heard PCE and TC, those are pretty bad. And I don't feel like there's been any discussion in terms of like the severity of the chemicals that are emitted. But then on top of that, like in the past, did DTSC not monitor these things or like just now, like just because of the community concern? Like, I don't.
So I think that, I'm not gonna speak for them, but what I understood is that they were doing activities, but there was not a readback of here's what we're doing, here's the level, here's the information. I think it was maybe a little bit of a less conversation style. And I think now as people are becoming more aware of environmental justice issues, environmental hazards, that there's a real intentional approach now to be transparent in that process. So I'm not gonna say if they were or were not sampling or anything. I agree with you, some of some pretty bad chemicals are here, and we need to address that. But I think a deeper dive, go ahead, you can answer.
So I would like to say, and I have a piece to big time on this one. So PTC has been involved in all these sites for a long time now. Since all these sites are these are operational facilities, and in the 80s, we were inspecting them, and as the amount of regulations in the United States are getting on, PTC has been in the forefront of that. So we've been involved in all these projects in some level or other, especially from an enforcement and permitting perspective. All of these sites have permit at some point. I understand both like Cherry and MBU or peer public sites, they had permitting from DTSC at some point, or sister agencies. So DTC has been involved in this entire time. Our involvement may not be, I agree that we may not have been transferred to the past, but we're trying to make sure that the community understands that the work that we're doing is clear to and it's in the way that fact matter, a form that you can understand. Because a lot of technical information, well, you feel free to call me, and if you have any questions about it, be more than happy to break it down for you. But understand that we understand a lot of the community may not understand the technical information, so we're trying to, at least for these sites, to break it down so that it's easier to understand. And we want to try and make sure that we stay as good citizens for the community and work with people. So you want to work for future. And how do you want to do this?
Yeah, I would just add that typically the cleanup process has mandated community involvements, like when there's a remedy selection document. Manjo mentioned that there's several coming up at different facilities, but when you see in Barstow, you will see the long history of the administrative record of DTSC involvement. And even then, these facilities have a long history of industrialization and use and chemicals, even before it became regulated in the mid-70s, right? So, DTSC is one of the youngest state agencies by, state agency standards. And so our involvement, as you saw here, dates back maybe 10, 15 years in some cases, and bringing them to a cleanup decision. But thanks to the efforts of the people gathered here, I believe we're going to have an enhanced community involvement opportunity to talk about all these sites collectively and individually. Because typically when we do work on one site, we'll look at a quarter-mile radius, and they might need some community members. But now that we see a regional bloom that's being addressed by multiple agencies, the Water Board, DTSC, OC, WHD, then we're going to be working closer together. And you're going to have a place at the table to say, what do you want to hear? What do you want to know? And how frequently you want to be communicated to, in addition to the mandated timeframes when there's public comment, open, or to receive comments and shape the investigations, etc. But you'll have the information to make sure that you know you're safe by everybody's efforts.
Okay, so thank you for that. So I will say that there is a evolving understanding about how to partner with communities. I think that's good. I think that as people have gotten to an understanding that when you live next to bad actors for whatever reason, their industry changed, or they use some type of product that now we know is terrible, right? You want to know that. right? Good, the bad, I wanna know what's in my community. And we need to learn to share that information in a way that's accessible. But then after that, you wanna know more information, health impacts, how do I keep myself safe, some of the things that we learned about water and the movement of things. So it is an ongoing conversation so that you can have better information to keep yourself safe. Also partnering with them and looking at what the remediation is gonna look like, what's the fix gonna be. And then I think probably it's useful down the road as you partner with your leaders in the community, at the city level, to think about, well, you know, maybe some of these entities don't need to be in our community. That, right, that's a different question. So I think part of the evolution and understanding environmental justice issues is to realize that since this is your home, these are your neighbors, asking important questions as you work together with your community leaders to say, as we make decisions about who the next business is going to be here, knowing how close it is to our home, let's ask some different questions about them. Think about what we've learned by past contamination, what we've learned about the nature of certain industries. And although this is hard information, it can instruct you about what to be aware of. And so part of the difficult thing about these exercises is we're all coming in on the back end and we're playing catch up for some old guard businesses that have been here for some time. And predate many of you in terms of your age, right? But either way, you have to be informed about the fact they're here. You need to look at your proximity to them, and you have to be very clear about exactly the steps that are being taken. Go ahead.
Yeah, since this could have just probably been around for a while,
Yeah.
areas. Anyone that might say, well, let's keep the alcohol. All the years.
You mean the resident?
Yeah, don't worry.
I don't have to answer that question. I don't know the answer. So at my last neighborhood, go ahead.
I do know the answer. There's actually quite a few residents that have suffered health issues that we believe is caused by all these preparations.
Okay.
And we've brought that up several times at other meetings in the past.
Well, I'd be interested in that information. You have my contact information, so share that with me.
Yeah,
I've learned about some other entities and locations in the community through some of the different, I met with, I think, the Logan neighborhood, or Madison Park. Some of the folks from UCI on your quality concern. So you are welcome to provide information so that I have a better understanding of the impacts in the community. There's a lot of industrial activity here, old and new. And I know that, you know, as you look at the locations of those things and proximity to your home, it's good to know if there's a history of health impacts that I should be aware of, but also that you should be aware of, right? So the goal here is to realize everybody has a job to do, but you are ultimately, hopefully working towards the same objective, which is to keep the residents healthy, to address the cleanup of the legacy sites. And I think although the vocabulary is perhaps different because it's technical, I would hope that as we move together in terms of a more targeted approach, coordinated, that you'll be able to have real actionable intelligence and information to make safety decisions. And then also to share with your community leaders about the folks that are moving into your community. And for some who are here, maybe whether or not it's appropriate that they stay or do that type of business. Those are important questions to ask. And I'm not advocating one way or another. But I do think you have good information about some of the businesses and the nature of the industry to ask important questions about, you know, should they continue in the form they are or whatever? Would other types of businesses be more appropriate? Could be closer to a school, closer to a home, and think about that. Those are zoning questions. They're a little bit different than some of the things that we're talking about today, which is cleanup. But you have a good advocate here with Margarita, and I think she would be receptive to those conversations and questions. Do you have a hand up?
I have a question specifically about Dyson.
Dyson. All right. And Joe forgot to answer. But
In this community update, it says additional remedial action to the soils greater than 25 feet are planned in the future. I know we have the Enviro store that we can go on, but generally speaking, our community doesn't know to go on to the website and look that up. Maybe just the 10, 20 people or whatever are here. Will there be something sent out to that vicinity when they start that future planning?
that's what I asked Margarita to make sure that she reached out to your neighborhood councils and partnered with BTSC that you guys have notice of when that information would be available. And I believe you get the comment on it.
Yeah, and so yeah, we will, and in this case, the
Can you go to that slide, the Dyson slide, the summary?
Thank you.
And the slide before. Okay, so, the interim draft, we already went through it on affairs, in 2021, so. We will be happy to create additional, for each of the additional base notification, and we have a couple of application staff here, there, behind, who will be more than happy to create updates. As we go through this process of making sure we're more transparent to the community, we want to make sure that all of these updates are going on a regular basis. So this will be updated on the website as well as the community, and I'm sure that at the point of when we go to the next phase, that we will have enough of a heads up to give the community an update.
Okay, so just as a technical matter, do you need, what were you thinking, like 30 days? How much was your notice here? I don't know the answer to that. So, is there 30 days?
Typically, 30
It
days.
is 30 days? Okay. So would that be helpful to have that 30 days?
No, because when they did this first phase, the amount of trucking that was coming through, the amount of noise that was coming through, the amount of possible vapors that we were afraid of, because it was consistent, and it went longer than what was anticipated, I believe. Or at least what we were under the impression of. I'm just concerned, like at that point, we need to kind of have a heads up traffic wise. It held up a lot of traffic. There was a lot of big semis and trucks, all kinds of stuff. So I'm just curious.
I remember the noise too.
Yeah.
It was early and.
It just went on.
Yeah, we will make sure that the community is updated. Generally, before any work starts, there is a notice that goes out to the community. Usually live site that says there's work going to be happening from this time to this time. I was not the project manager at the time. I'm not sure if that was done, but we will make sure going forward that all these factors, there is some notification that goes out to the community live site, so they're aware of the traffic issues and the noise issues. And generally, when there's a problem, our public transportation staff are very responsive, and their information is on there. So you can contact them, and if there's an issue, we will address it at that point. So unfortunately, I wasn't the project manager at the time, so I don't necessarily know what happened. But what I can say that going forward, we'll make sure that is addressed.
And again, second part of that, in this type of cleanup, you said it was just excavation. So with excavation being done, basically you guys are just pulling up dirt and loading it and taking it somewhere else, correct?
Yes.
So when it's being loaded and taken somewhere else, what's happening to the community with those vapors when the cars are sitting in the middle lane and there's residential on one side, industrial on the other? Residential's taking all that in as well.
Yeah, as part of the plan, the cleanup plan, the IRAC, they spell out the procedures for handling and for screening, and there's action levels. There are other regulatory requirements set by AQMD as well. And we have our also community monitoring plans that set standards to be exceeded. And if they come close to being exceeded, operations need to shut down, right? If there's highways, operations need to shut down. If there's complaints, operations need to shut down, and we need to regroup. So it's very important that we come to you and you come to us, and you know who the project manager is, so that we can respond. And we will have regular oversight, but it's not 24/7 on site. So usually the community members see things firsthand. They can call, and we set the ball in motion to take action. And if there's suspicious operation, you can let us know. Visible dust, odors coming off the site, and we'll communicate that. We'll communicate to you what the action levels are. What can you anticipate as an odor coming from this type of a contaminant? Frankly, there should be no odors coming off the property, except the workers are the most at risk. And if there's high enough levels, they have to put on equipment to protect usually the respiratory exposure pathway and stuff. But all of that is spelled out. Transportation plan, you have the opportunity to influence transportation routes. Let's say you don't want to go into a school, you don't want truck staging, you don't want the hours of operation because it wakes you up or whatever. Or sometimes trucks start staging like at 5 in the morning, that they load very quickly and you hear the backup beep, 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 beep. That's a problem. So all of that stuff, you just need to relate to us. It'll be spelled out, but sometimes things do, are out of compliance and we need to respond to them.
I like her question. So if there's, let's say that you didn't like the route, the optimal transportation plan, it sounded like it was not optimal. So is there a way that they can say, this is the plan they had from before, can you reroute it? You said yes.
That document is available online. You can see if there's a transportation plan. But the new document will have that, and we will work with you. Once we put it out for public comment, if you say, you know what, I need some help, kind of somebody walking me through this, we'll have a public meeting where we'll highlight those areas that have been of concern. And again, if we have an ongoing, relationship here and understand what your kind of pet peeves are, we'll focus on those and address those upfront.
Okay, is that helpful to know that you can review the
To know that I
transportation?
can contact, because I know nobody's, you said you're not watching them 24/7, obviously.
Right.
So my third question was gonna be who monitors it? Like, yes, there's levels that they need to follow, but who's monitoring that they're following those levels?
Yeah, it depends, it could be OSHA, it could be AQMD, it could be us, the project manager is on site sometimes, the geologist. It all depends on the work, right? We look at the overall kind of operations, but there is communication and we're aware of what's going on every week, every day, and they're reporting back to us as well. But if you do see something, for example, let's say they're stockpiling on soil, that soil being staged, right, and the piles are getting too high, or it's getting really windy, and that's a problem, then you can call and, they know that they're not supposed to exceed 8 feet of the fence height, but sometimes, a worker will just kind of dump a little bit more, and then it becomes a problem, right, and we have to address it.
Okay, that's helpful. So in terms of safety and best practices, do not be close to the pile, but maybe she could document that here's what I'm seeing and contact your
Correct.
person and then.
Correct.
I did all that on the first phase,
phase.
and sent it to Margarita.
So I think maybe now there's hopefully a better plan in place.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would be one of them, actually, it would be myself or one of the other project managers.
One of the other project managers. Okay, so you've got some contact information, who to send it to, and it seems like a daily or weekly review of those.
Yes. Yeah. So our new project manager for these sites that Angela has presented is Angela Turner, who is joining us here today. And we'll have her contact information made available to you as well.
Okay, right, so now you know who to find, Angela and Manjula.
You can even talk to her after.
Okay, so I think that's a good plan forward. Now, does anyone have any other questions? Oh, go ahead.
How are these violators penalized for these infractions?
So these seem to be historical violations. Generally, for me, I'm a criminal prosecutor. We also have a civil side. Standard violations in charging are about 5 years. Some of the dates that you've heard, very old dates in terms of the contamination. That does not, however, mean you can't refer something to me in terms of how they're handling their case, how they're complying or not complying. And if there's a viable something for me to look into, I can bring a case and investigation. You also have a city attorney's office here that can do an odor or nuisance action. A little, it's not as sexy as a felony, but it's something in terms of accountability. In addition to that, you have a local county DA. So if it's not something that could reach for whatever reason, jurisdictionally on federal, then we can refer to our prosecution partners and I can reach out to them. At a minimum, though, we would want to report any of the things to the environmental agencies responsible for oversight. But if there's a particular violation that you're concerned about, you can certainly refer to me and I can look into their sampling, historical compliance, or lack thereof. If they are not good neighbors in sort of a broad sense, and then I would see what the issues are. Hazardous materials, there are charges for that. Clean Water Act violations, charges for that. Stormwater drain contamination, air quality violations under the Clean Air Act, all of those things. So those are potential things that can be referred, but there are statute of limitations that limit some of the work that I can bring in terms of the current case on some of the historical legacy stuff we're talking about. But if there's current bad conduct going on or reports of things 5 years back, you talked about health quality, issues of concern in terms of the living and quality exposure to impacts that are impacting people's house and life, you can let me be aware of those, because it's the only tool in my toolkit is anyone I want to call. I have no limitations in who I am, whoever I want to bring to the table, and that's the role of environmental justice coordinator. As a criminal prosecutor, I have some limitations, but the goal is really to partner with all of the people charged to create better outcomes in environmental justice communities, so that there's not a disproportionate impact and burdens that go unaddressed. Is that helpful? Okay, good. Thank you for the questions. Good question. Go ahead. Yeah, there are other stuff in the features on this bill, the legacy. But reminders on the presentation, there is recipe, right? It's like, people, Thompson, and so we did that. I guess it was to be kind of, if people who have been there, right, like they're still being affected by these. Sure, but you're saying if they're still in the same business, it's not a sublease property, they still have ownership of it, they're still active in the industry, and they're still polluting the community, is there a liable potential charge? The answer is yes. But I think the cleanups that we're dealing with, which are historical, they're based on, there was a lawsuit 100 years ago, tell me when that lawsuit was that you mentioned before. There was one lawsuit that I'm aware of.
Did I mention the lawsuit?
Yeah, there was a lawsuit, there was a quite, maybe there's like a settlement, it was 10 years ago, like, a long time ago, there was an action, and I don't know if it was.
Well, but this, yeah, I mean, this has been litigation since 2008.
There was litigation over some of the contaminants, but not to call you out, but just in general, there has been some lawsuits, but that's a private civil lawsuit. I can't tell you today if there's a separate EPA civil potential charge. I am not aware of any federal charges that have been brought by the criminal side of my house, that I can tell you. But in terms of more recent action, if you're aware of ongoing issues that are concerned, like I've received calls about different folks in your neighborhood. That's, you can always refer those things, and you can look and evaluate. So is that helpful? So if there's concern, but just be aware, if it's not consistent operator owner, and they're still not there, there's some challenges, but it doesn't mean you can't really do it. Okay, sure.
Can I just add to that too, you know, from the enforcement side of things, it's a different side of the house than from cleanup. So if you're a former owner or operator of a facility, you're liable under two main laws, and either as a hazardous waste generator or just as an owner who released hazardous substances into the environment, and you're liable for cleanup. Now, liability for cleanup sometimes is far more expensive than being penalized and then settling and going through a lot of effort, right? And these cleanups are not cheap. And, when you hear about the details of the presentations, not that we care about the money, I just want to let you know that, it needs to be cleaned up to be protective of public health, and that's the bottom line, right? And the environment, right? For protection of both. So they're still responsible, and we will pursue them for them.
Yeah.
Even if we don't penalize them or put them in jail, I mean, that's a means to an end, but cleanup is the longer plan.
Right. So I think the important thing to know is, one, sometimes there is legacy contamination, the business is gone, they're no longer there. That's part of the case to say, but you can't, but they are still legally responsible in regular way for the ways that they do. He's correct on that. And that could be an enforcement action, even I technically can't do this. But we did say that in some examples, there may be someone who's still outside doing bad things, creating potential harms, risk, or generating ways they're not managing, have to control on our property appropriately. That would be something right and reasonable to refer. I say I'm concerned about it. This gentleman had a suggestion. Go ahead.
Sure. If this been run for a while, why haven't you been
That'll be next. So that's not, so this is really kind of get our arms around the location. I believe Margarita has identified partners who will be able to be available to answer some of the closure questions and different things. And then I had, I think we're going to talk about each different location, but the goal is to do those one at a time. So you can do a deeper dive because there are different contaminants, different chemicals at those locations. So I'll let Margarita address that.
Can I just start real quick? In every investigation that's been done, there's been a human health screening evaluation that's been prepared by a toxicologist and reviewed by a toxicologist. And there have been cleanup standards that are based on, if your question is about, health of the community, typically that issue is also addressed at the public meetings with remedy selection, and questions are answered, and public health officers are invited, and public nurses made available depending on the contaminants at the site, right? And if we need that in the future, that can be arranged as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, as the person from the city who's overseeing the neighborhoods and environmental justice section. It's beyond the public meetings, right? It's beyond the public meetings by each side. This really has to do with helping our community and ourselves understand what is the magnitude of all of these companies being here for a long time. What has the city done in terms of the general plan? But what are these other agencies and what is their role, right? So there is a lot of understanding together that we're gonna have to navigate. So these questions, like everyone here, really emphasize the need for this meeting here today, but the future commitment that the city and these agencies have to continue to engage with you and other neighbors who couldn't, be here. So that's kind of, if anything, a takeaway. So there's a lot. Bringing in the health department, understanding, breaking it down, sharing more about the process of these public meetings and what to expect and how you as residents can influence that process. Especially with the future cleanups on site. That is where I think we're going to be able to accomplish a lot together. So I just wanted to leave you with that.
So I think that's a good thing to be able to incorporate all of these sort of next steps. It's sort of in terms of a community dialogue and plan. And then I guess I want to impart is that if there's any particular entity that you're concerned about, you can always email, advise me. Of course, I can say I can't handle it, but somebody else can. So that is an open door policy you should be aware of. Now, I obviously am an attorney, so I'm not going to be hitting all of the health issues, but I'm always willing to be educated about the different specialties. And really the goal is you sort of want the dream team for Santa Ana, right? You want to have the right people with the right skill set to be able to answer your questions, be able to assist you in your neighborhood with the right ways to protect your health, protect your family, children going to school, your elders, and to make sure that you have good information that's actionable intelligence so you can make good decisions. The other thing is, of course, we want to hold people accountable who have, been polluting and make sure that they're following the ordered plans and things that they're supposed to do. But there are going to be new decisions, new questions, new concerns that you may have. You can refer those to me. I'm always happy to work with Margarita or anybody who specializes in the area to be able to address those concerns, but that doesn't have to be defined as a case. And so I just want to make sure the environmental justice coordinator does not require you kind of fashion put together a perfect case. It can be a concern. So if there's something you're concerned about, I'm happy to hear about it. So I want to make sure you know that. The other thing is, if it's not something in my jurisdiction, I can call any of our agency partners and get a response, so you have good information. I had a couple of referrals from the last meetings that we had, where people want very specific information about a spill or something that happened, and wanted to know, I heard a lot about crematoria and different places. So I am aware of some of the issues in the community, but there may be other things that you come across. Feel free to educate me. I'm happy to take direction in terms of learning about the issues in your community. But the primary objective of today is a jumping off point as a new model of engagement. So you have transparency, good information, and hopefully good awareness of the people who are already doing a lot of good work to try to address your concern. Also understanding they have phases of things to do because there's a lot of industrial activity in this area. And I think historically, it may not have been that some of the residential areas were so close or contemplated or aware that homes seem to be so harmful where they would might be. So I'm not absolving anyone of responsibility. I'm just saying there's better awareness, better information. And the goal here is really just to put you in the best position to make good decisions in the community, engage with your leaders, and to use me if I can be of help to try to, get some good information for you to make better decisions so that you know and understand not only the law, but also the agencies responsible for enforcing that law. Okay? I hope this has been instructive. I don't know if there's any other questions. I don't want to keep anyone too long. Margarita, do you have anything final word?
No, just thank you again, and we anticipate coming back on a quarterly basis. In the meantime, our contact information are in the PowerPoint. We recorded this meeting. We're going to upload it on the city's YouTube channel, and we're going to upload the presentations in the different languages. So at least, and we'll do a recap on our weekly constant contact message.
So I'm going to say thank you to the agencies for being in the hot seat with Amanda. I'm sure it was a little bit difficult, predictable than most, but my goal is really to have the information you need, and I'm really grateful for the time on an evening when I know it's a busy time for many. Thank you for making the time, thank you for asking good and important questions, and I hope it was helpful. Have a good evening. Thank you for coming.